Well, good afternoon, everybody, and um, thank you again to the organisers for inviting me to speak this afternoon. I apologise that I can't be there in person, but hopefully we'll have that opportunity to talk at some point in the future. So in the next 10 minutes, I'll just give you a very brief history of my experiences in the pharmaceutical industry. So this is quite a personal reflection. Over more than 25 years, I've had a rather unplanned journey, enjoying my time in the pharmaceutical industry. Although I had my basic and medical and physician training in Australia, I subsequently left Australia and spent 6 years in the UK, working in a couple of different industry positions, really enjoying those. And then spent 10 years with Novartis, and then over 11 years with Celgene. Moving between Australia into Asia Pacific and back in Europe, working in local and regional and global roles. At about this time last year, I decided to say my farewells to Celgene. There was a reorganization, and moving back overseas wasn't really part of my plan, and started in a consulting role. And I'm now working across a few different companies, working with some very, very interesting science, looking at inhibitors of MYC, some development of small molecule inhibitors in a range of oncology settings, and a small CXCR4 antibody. So very enjoyable science, and still loving my role in that R&D focused industry position. In terms of the kind of things that really continue to motivate me, it's been really interesting to be able to be part of the development of drugs that have made a difference in some very difficult diseases. And part of that is being involved in the oversight and development of really innovative trials and research that have changed clinical practice. There's also a key organizational piece as you become more senior in an organization to help build those organizations and develop colleagues in their careers. One of the most professionally rewarding components of all that has been the opportunity to work with really wonderful physicians and scientists around the world, and that's been a great opportunity to learn from them over the years. Also, I hope that I've had a positive influence in terms of the way we develop and market and promote products in the commercial environment, and provide that strong medical scientific leadership for my corporate colleagues. I've been very lucky to work with some really transformative medicines, and in some of those you see from this list here, drugs like Gleevec, Revlimid, Pomalyst, luspatercept. I've had the fortune to see them from phase 1 right through their clinical development to the marketplace and beyond. And seeing that whole story develop is a really fascinating part of drug development. I've also been part of drugs that have not made it, and for various reasons, most commonly toxicities, but somewhere the science was perhaps, or we were working ahead of the science, and perhaps the first two those in that list, two matrix metalloproteinase inhibitors. I was involved in the oversight of a European development program where we did some wonderful science, but ultimately the drugs didn't make it, in part because we probably didn't understand that science well enough. But the drugs were active, and so you do have to learn from these failures and disappointments. But overall, I've been very lucky to be part of a number of very successful products. So how do I spend my days? If you ask my children over the years, this little picture here from one of my sons, their perspective of my arriving and leaving and frequently being in some other part of the world had a strong element of truth, and has been a part of my life up until the last year or so. And certainly in the pre-COVID-19 days, I spent an extremely large proportion of my working life traveling to and fro, which has its ups and downs, of course, especially when you're better recognized perhaps by the Qantas cabin crew at times than your children. But seriously, you can see that the areas that I have been involved in are really quite broad, and actually describing that as a whole is something of a challenge. But I have helped provide medical and scientific oversight and governance to our development programs of the companies that I've worked with. Been heavily involved in protocol design and their development, both in clinical development, CD, and medical affairs studies. Closely associated with the basic and translational research that supports the programs moving forward, evaluating data, interpreting it, presenting it both internally and externally to investigators, governments, institutions, and then a number of parallel processes of the regulatory development of projects, health economics, supporting the economic value of a new drug as it comes to the market, the critical need for ongoing monitoring of drug safety, that's PVG or pharmacovigilance. And I've been long-term member of company safety committees, making key decisions on products, their ongoing development, change to product labeling, and in sort of most disappointing cases, product withdrawal. Providing support and oversight of our marketing practices and organizational oversight, recruitment, teaching, management, budgeting, forecasting. So there's a great opportunity for real breadth of activities. As a physician or scientist, there are many roles in industry, from basic science and research. The features of clinical development, and clinical development is very highly focused towards the preparation of a package of data that allows you to submit a drug for registration. So it's a very focused component of the overall drug development process that involves the operational side of things, translational medicine, the regulatory affairs, so the actual discussion and negotiation with the regulatory authorities. And then supporting all that is the broader group of medical affairs activities. Some of that is filling in data gaps through research that we often conduct in concert with investigators and other institutions, what we call IITs, or investigator-initiated trials and research, provision of medical information and education services, scientific liaison, again, pharmacovigilance, the oversight of the drug safety as a product evolves and develops in the marketplace, and the health economics, and particularly in countries like Australia, in a reimbursed market where it's critical to define and support the economic benefit of a product to ensure that there's a reasonable value offered for the drug as it comes to the market. And then many scientists and physicians choose the business side, and they will move into marketing, sales, business, and general management. And some of the best and most senior managers that I've worked with in my career have indeed been physician scientists. Some other comments in terms of the importance of the physicians and scientists in this industry. You can see that as a global industry, about 5 million people or more are employed, and a third of those are in STEM roles. Enormous amount of money spent on R&D, approximately 150 billion in 2015, representing around 15% of a company's turnover, and thousands of new drugs in development. 2015, there were 56 new entities launched. At a personal level, I've been involved in a number of products that have had really transformative impact on hard-to-treat diseases. So diseases like chronic myeloid leukemia and multiple myeloma have been, in the last 20 years or so, enormously impacted in a positive way by new drug developments. And then more recently, although my involvement has been more peripheral, but the checkpoint inhibitors, PD-1, PD-L1 inhibitors. And sort of final comment there, of 28 transformative medicines in a generation, the vast majority came out of fundamental discoveries and basic research, although in some ways disappointingly a 30-year gap between that first insight and FDA approval. And indeed, I'm working very heavily at the moment on a small peptide inhibitor of MYC. MYC was first described as an important proto-oncogene in the late 1970s. We hope we're on the threshold of a effective MYC inhibitor, but that gives you a sense of the gap that can exist between those basic insights and subsequent effective drug development. One thing that has been tremendously rewarding for me has been the ability to help develop individuals. And I can give you a couple of recent examples at Celgene, the company that I was with previously. The first of these, Tamara Eto, a lady who completed her PhD at the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne, did a postdoc at the MD Anderson, and then back to Monash in Melbourne. We spoke initially through her supervisor, and I spent some time suggesting or giving her some sort of thoughts on potential career opportunities. She subsequently joined Bristol Myers Squibb as a scientific advisor. A couple of years later at Celgene, we were in a position to offer her a role, and she joined us. And then a couple of years after that, she moved to our global headquarters as associate director, subsequently director. I actually know in the last little while she's left Celgene, now working for Amgen on the West Coast as director in a global program. But she's a tremendous lady, a scientist, and has done extremely well in her career, and a great example of that kind of success. Jessica, a second example, not a dissimilar story to Tamara, did a PhD here in Australia, did postdocs at Cambridge and Glasgow, again came back. We met her through, again, the Monash actually. She was putting together a lymphoma disease registry with Stephen Opat there. We were very impressed with her. A few months later, we were looking for a scientific liaison, approached her and attracted her to join us. Again, she has done extremely well in that role, subsequently moved globally into a global role, and now is director of a launch program with a product called luspatercept for myelodysplastic syndrome. And again, a great example of somebody who's come out of a PhD in Australia. You don't have to move globally, but the global opportunities can sometimes be certainly attractive career development opportunities for people. So thank you for your attention. You can see that my career and many of the other presentations you'll see are not unidirectional. They are something of a zigzag path. I do wish you a great deal of luck. Sometimes you will come across challenges, but you saw in Tamara's slides, she comments on the need for flexibility and persistence, and I think that's very true. And but there are tremendous opportunities out there. So thanks very much for your attention. I look forward to our breakout work groups. Thanks again.